बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम अस्सलाम वालेकुम। तो आज की इस वीडियो में हम एक दफ़ा फिर माया से बात करने वाले हैं जो कि सीसीएम वेबसाइट की तरफ से हैं। और आज इनसे हम ये व्हाट्स द मैटर द रूट्स ऑफ कंसर्न ये जो भी है इसके बारे में हम आज ये माया से कुछ सवालात करने वाले हैं। तो फिर चलिए शुरू करते हैं। ओके, सो हेलो, हाउ आर यू? Okay, so I just wanna ask you a few questions today about what's the matter, the roots of concern. So be ready.
I'm locked in. Lay it on me. What's weighing on you?
Okay, so the first question I just wanna ask you is that what does the phrase "what's the matter" mean to you?
To me, it sounds like an invitation. It's that moment when someone notices a shift in your energy, a sigh, a look, a silence that lasts a second too long. And they're basically saying, I see you, and I'm here if you want to let it out. It's less about the problem itself and more about the offer of support. Does that land with how you're using it, or are you thinking of it in a different way?
Okay, so another question is that why do some people sometimes hide what is bothering them?
I think it's usually a survival mechanism. Sometimes it's about not wanting to be a burden, or maybe they're still trying to make sense of the feeling themselves and don't have the words yet. There's also that fear that if they say it out loud, it becomes real or they'll be judged for it. It's a bit of a lonely place to be, but it often feels safer than the alternative. Do you think people do it more to protect themselves or to protect others?
Okay, so the next question is that what are the most common reasons people became worried?
Usually the big looming things, money, health, and the constant puzzle of relationships. But honestly, I think a lot of the most persistent worry comes from the what ifs, the fear of the unknown, or the feeling that you're not doing enough with your life. It's that gap between where you are and where you think you should be. Which of those feels the most universal to you?
Okay, so the next question is that how can we recognize when someone is concerned?
It's usually in the things they aren't saying. You notice it in the small shifts, a sudden lack of eye contact, a shorter tone than usual, or maybe they're suddenly way too focused on their phone. Sometimes it's the opposite, where they're overcompensating with a forced cheerfulness that doesn't quite reach their eyes. It's all about that baseline. Once you know someone's normal rhythm, the deviations start to speak for themselves. Have you ever had a gut feeling about someone that turned out to be spot on?
Okay, so what are the how can the next question is that why is it important to talk about our feelings?
Because keeping everything inside is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. Eventually, it's going to pop up, and usually at a time when you're least prepared for it. Talking about it just lets the pressure out, makes the problem feel smaller because you're not the only one carrying it anymore. And it helps you realize that a lot of the things that feel catastrophic in your head are actually manageable when they're out in the open. Do you find it easy to open up, or do actually I have to stop you right there where our session is about to hit its limit in a minute, and I don't want you to get cut off mid-sentence. We'll have to.
Okay, so okay, so the next question is that I just wanna ask you is that how can stress affect our decisions?
That's a big one. Usually, when we're stressed, our brains stop looking at the whole picture and just hunt for the quickest way to make the feeling go away. It's like we switch from thinking mode to survival mode, which is why we often make impulsive choices we regret later. Do you feel like you're more of a panic decider or do you tend to freeze up when the pressure hits?
So, what is the difference between concern and fear?
I think of concern as having a seat at the table. It's more of a mindful awareness that something needs your attention. Fear, on the other hand, is like the one who kicks the door down. It's visceral and usually pushes you toward a reaction like running away or shutting down rather than a solution. Concern asks, how do I fix this? Well, fear asks, how do I survive this?
Okay, so the next question is that can concerns sometimes be helpful? And if they are helpful, so why? What is the reason behind it?
Totally. Concern is basically your brain's way of giving you a heads up. It's helpful because it acts like a signal to prepare. If you're concerned about a test, it pushes you to study. If you're concerned about a friend, it prompts you to check in on them. It's that middle ground where you're aware of a risk, but you still have the mental space to actually plan for it without that little nudge of concern. We'd probably just walk right into every mistake without a second thought. Do you find that being concerned usually helps you get things done, or does it just end up feeling like noise?
Okay, so how can we calm ourselves when we feel worried?
Honestly, the best way is usually to get out of your head and back into your body. Something as simple as the 5 to 4, 3 to 2, 1 technique, where you name 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, and so on, can act like a circuit breaker for that spiral. Deep breathing is the gold standard, obviously, but even just splashing cold water on your face can trigger a physical reset. Um, I'm curious, have you ever tried any specific grounding tricks, or do you usually just try to ride the wave until it passes?
Why do small problems sometimes feel very big?
It's usually because our brains aren't actually reacting to the small thing itself, but to the pile of everything else we're already carrying. It's like a glass of water that's already full to the brim. One single extra drop doesn't just add a bit more water, it makes the whole thing overflow. That tiny problem is just the drop that finally breaks the surface. Sometimes it's also a way for our minds to vent frustration about a much bigger issue that feels too overwhelming to tackle head on. Do you think that happens to you often where one small thing just feels like the final straw?
Okay, so how can talking to a trusted person help?
Talking it out is basically like taking a messy pile of thoughts and laying them out on a table where you can actually see them. When you keep everything inside, your brain just loops the same worries over and over. But when you speak them out loud to someone who actually cares, it forces you to organize those thoughts into words, which often makes the problem feel smaller and more manageable. Plus, just knowing you're not carrying the weight alone can lower your stress levels almost instantly. Do you have someone in your life who's the go to person when you need to clear your head?
Okay, so what role does family play in reducing concerns?
Family can be the ultimate safety net. Whether it's a parent, a sibling, or a cousin, there's something about that shared history that creates a unique kind of security. Just knowing there are people who have seen you at your absolute worst and still have your back can take the edge off a lot of worries. It turns a what if I fail into a well, if I do, I still have a place to go. Of course, that depends entirely on the family dynamic, but when it's healthy, it's like having a built in support system that doesn't require an invitation. Do you feel like your family is more of a calming presence for you, or do they sometimes add to the noise?
How do friends help us during difficult times?
Friends friends bring a different kind of energy than family does because they're the people you actually chose to have in your life. They often offer perspective that's more in the trenches with you, especially if they're going through similar things. Well, family provides that deep rooted safety. Then um, friends provide the solidarity, that feeling of, I get exactly why this sucks, which can be incredibly validating when you start. Plus, they're usually the ones who can distract you with a laugh or a random adventure exactly when you need to stop thinking about your problems. Do you find that your friends are better at giving you a shoulder to cry on or finding a way to make you laugh when things get heavy?
What are healthy ways to deal with stress?
The most sustainable way is to find things that actually make you feel like yourself again. For some, that's something active, like a long walk or a workout to burn off that restless energy. For others, it's a creative outlet, like photography, journaling, or just getting lost in music that lets the mind drift for a while. Even something as simple as a do nothing day can be a huge reset. The key is finding a balance between tackling the source of the stress and giving yourself permission to totally unplug. What's your go to move? You just need to shut the world out for a bit.
Okay, so another question is that can overthinking make concerns worse, and if it is, so how?
Oh, absolutely. Overthinking is like taking a small spark of concern and feeding it a giant pile of dry wood. Instead of focusing on the actual problem, you start building what if scenarios that probably will never happen, which just creates a loop of anxiety. You're no longer solving a problem, you're just practicing being stressed. It turns a manageable task into a mountain because you're analyzing every single possible mistake before you've even started. Do you find yourself spiraling into those what if loops often?
Okay, so what are some signs that some person needs emotional support?
It's usually in the shifts in their baseline, the things they normally do that suddenly stop, like someone who's always the life of the party suddenly going quiet, or a person who's usually laid back becoming irritable over tiny things. You might notice they're withdrawing from the people they usually love, or they're just constantly exhausted, even if they've been sleeping. Sometimes it's more subtle, like they stop talking about the future or start making self deprecating jokes that don't actually feel like jokes. Do you think people around you are generally good at spotting those signs, or do they tend to wait until someone explicitly asks for help?
Why do children and adults worry about different things?
Hmm. It mostly comes down to what's at stake in their world. For a child, their entire universe is usually their parents, school, and their friends. So a fight on the playground or a bad grade can feel like a total catastrophe. Their worries are very immediate and centered on security and belonging. Adults have a much broader, messier set of pressures, things like bills, career paths, and complex relationships. Our worries are usually more abstract and long term, focusing on stability and the what ifs of the future. Basically, kids worry about the here and now, while adults worry about everything that might happen 10 years from now. Do you think adults ever accidentally bring that playground level intensity to small problems?
Okay, so how can listening carefully help someone who is upset?
It's because most of the time people aren't actually looking for a solution right away. They're looking to feel understood. When you really listen without interrupting or trying to fix it immediately, you're essentially telling them that their feelings are valid and that they aren't alone in that headspace. That lowers their defenses and allows them to process the emotion instead of just fighting it. Often, just the act of being heard is what actually calms the storm, and the solution becomes obvious once the emotional noise dies down. Do you think you're more of a listener when your friends are upset, or do you immediately jump into problem solving mode?
Okay, so another last and final question is that what message would you give to someone who is struggling with worries today?
I'd tell them that it's okay to not have everything figured out right this second. Worries have a way of making the future feel like a giant wall, but you don't have to climb the whole thing today. You just have to take one small manageable step. Be as kind to yourself as you would be to a best friend who was feeling the same way. And remember that most of the what ifs we build in our heads never actually happen. You've handled every difficult day you've ever faced so far, and your track record for getting through the hard stuff is currently 100%.
Okay, so today it was nice talking to you. So I'll talk to you later. For now, goodbye. तो आज की इस वीडियो में इतना ही था। अगर आप लोगों को ये वीडियो पसंद आए तो इस वीडियो को लाइक करना मत भूलिएगा, चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करना मत भूलिएगा ऐसे से रिलेटेड वीडियोस देखने के लिए। तो आज की इस वीडियो में इतना ही था, मिलते हैं आपसे नेक्स्ट वीडियो में, तब तक के लिए अल्लाह हाफिज़।